Welcome to the I Create Daily podcast. I'm Leora Alderson.
And I'm Devani Alderson. We're your co-hosts on this journey of creativity and productivity.
I Create Daily is for artists in every genre of creating, from musicians to writers, crafters to inventors, bloggers to entrepreneurs. I Create Daily is a movement for creators serious about your art.
If you're into creating anything, this podcast is definitely for you. Thank you so much for joining us on this journey. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the I Create Daily podcast, a movement for creators serious about their art. I'm Devani.
And I'm Leora. We love the mission of our guest today. After a near-death experience at age 22, Tayo Rockson has been on a journey to build a media empire that helps people become the best version of themselves. An untraditional visionary and 21st century gentleman whose podcast ranked number 2 on entrepreneur.com for business podcasts. Our guest today, welcome, Tayo Rockson. Tayo Rockson. I messed that up.
No, it's okay. People always
Tayo Rockson.
People always mix my name up, but yeah, no, it's an honor to be here.
And his full name is Tayo Rockson.
It's a pleasure to have you on. And
yeah, so
how did you know, Devani?
She's funny. And it's great that you chose Tayo. So we've heard Tayo, we've heard Ty. So you say variations on that, and you probably answer to all of them.
Yeah. So I'll tell you the story. So obviously it's a Nigerian name. I'm Nigerian, and the full name is Akintayo, and Tayo for short. Akintayo means a warrior as brother's joy. But ever since I came to America, or every time I come to an American international school or American audience, people always tell me, well, it should be Tayo because it's T-A-Y-O. And I'm always like, how are you telling me how to spell my name? Well, so people always say Tayo or Ty or Tio, but it's Tayo.
Yeah, it's lovely. And Rockson is your actual birth name?
I know. Yes, it is.
How amazing. That's awesome. It's like totally a stage name, and you are a speaker, and there's so much to your story. So we want to get right into it. It's like you mentioned, born in Nigeria, you've pretty much traveled the globe. You've been and lived around the globe, a global citizen. And so there's so many facets, and what we're interested in, of course, is what we started out with. What happened at 22 to set you on the journey that you're on? And we know it kind of started before, from your experience of, racial differences and all kinds of accepting and non-accepting experiences in the world, but it seemed like it really catapulted you and sealed it more fully around age 22. So you can start there, or wherever you think is most relevant, to tell us how you got started doing the work that you're doing in the world.
Well, you know what? Let me take it back just a little bit. So I want to take it back to 2011. I feel like I'm a storyteller. So I just graduated from college, right? And I was desperately looking for a job, and me being the Nigerian and a foreigner in this country, it's different. And so I applied to over 85 jobs, and they all said no. And so I found myself in a situation where the clock was ticking. I needed to find a job that would sponsor my visa. And in my race against time, I reached back to all the companies I'd interned for in the past, and I was like, hey, can you take a chance with me? And one eventually did, and I was ecstatic. I called my parents, I Skyped them, I was like, I got a job in America. And my mom and dad, they were like this big celebrations. Everybody, my son Akintayo has done it. He has gotten a job in the land of the free. and that was all good and done. I'm the oldest of 3 boys, and so you're in Nigeria. You sort of take on the pride, and any shame is with everyone. But here was the kicker: it wasn't what I wanted to do. Right. My dream ever since I was 10 was to inspire the next set of global leaders. I wanted to inspire change makers to solve today's problems. And at that time, at the age of 21, I somehow managed to suppress that dream. And all I could think of now was how I was going to make a monthly quota of $10,000 as my new job as a salesman. And that was the other trick. They told me I was doing social media, and I went there like, no, you're a salesman. You got to make $10,000 a month. Otherwise, you're gone. And so, poof. Just like that, I thought I had to give up my dreams, and, or at least so I thought. And my identity was taken away from me. It was now lost in this world where, that I had never imagined for myself. In my mind, I had tried over 85 times to pursue my dreams, and it was never going to happen. So why bother? And I would continue to think this way up until that fateful day that you brought up. It was August 22, 2012. I was driving to work in my burgundy Toyota Camry, like usual. And I got to the point where the road merged onto the highway. And I stepped on the accelerator pedal until I got to 60 miles per hour. Because when I used to drive, I live in New York now, I used to follow the rules. 60 miles per hour is what they said. So 60 miles per hour, and then my lane was all of a sudden cut into half. And this neighboring car had lost control. And as a result of that, I was swerving all over the place. And in the process, I hit the left guardrail. And then I hit one car. And then two cars. I hit the right guardrail. With another car. And then back into the left guardrail. And this time, car lifts up. I'm 22 years old. And I was certain I was going to flip over. But, as I saw, this was the cliche thing. I saw my life flash before me. I only had one thought. And that was, have you done everything that you said you were going to do in life? And, have I done everything I said I was going to do in life? And, my survival instinct kicked in. The answer was no. Obviously, I was just sort of gave up. And I slammed the brakes. And shortly after that, I found a way to get out of the car. And I was in the middle of the road, oncoming cars. And my car was completely totaled. There was debris everywhere. There were 3 cars all hit. But I was alive.
Wow.
I was in one piece. And that was when I realized that I needed to get my identity back. And all of a sudden, I had clarity on the meaningful things of life. I decided then and there that I would live life on my own terms and pursue my own dreams. So I quit my job shortly after that. Then I moved to New York City to figure that out. And then, I'm sure we'll talk about the other things. But that was the impetus, the turning point.
Right. Wow. I mean, that is like a horrific experience to live through, but then to walk out of it is amazing.
Yeah.
Not only to walk out of it, but then walk out of it and have such a clear vision of, well, this is who I'm becoming now. And I'm not this other person anymore who got, along the way clouded with all these other things in life, but I am going to become this person that I always wanted to be. And so what are you doing now? What work are you doing? What's your primary focus?
Right. Okay. No, and that's good. And both of you are so great. And the moment that you mentioned before I answer the question is, I feel like everybody comes to that crossroads in life where they have to decide or determine the path for the rest of their life. And it's up to you whether you're willing to take the road less traveled. I certainly don't hope it's a near-death experience for everyone, but everybody comes at that point. It's graduation, it's something. Yeah. And so that was the moment that was for me. And so to answer your question, Devani, what I do now is I help people become better communicators, whether it's communicating across cultures or communicating with impact. My background is such that I grew up in 5 countries and 4 continents by the time I was 18. And so I was the minority everywhere I went, right? I was always in between cultures. If I wanted to join a sports teams, if I wanted to ask a girl out, if I wanted to just fit in, I needed to understand what it was like, for lack of a better word, to be a chameleon. And when you're a kid in your formative years, you're not trying to stick out. You're just like, I just want to be this person. And so I was code switching left and right. I had, I remember this experience. I was a 10-year-old kid with a thick Nigerian accent in a French-speaking country in an American international school going through puberty. And so I was like, I'm ready different. So I was like, what am I going to do? And so that was my experience. And when I was trying to figure out what it was that I was going to do, I just knew after the accident that I needed to get out of my environment. So anyone listening, if you're creative, if you're an aspiring entrepreneur, examine your environment. Is it where you need to be? Does it amplify what it is your inner passions are? And so I didn't quite know what the path was. So I started to really, I need to be brave enough to be myself. So I said, I'm going to first change my environment. I know my biggest role models are Oprah Winfrey and the late Nelson Mandela. I love Oprah for the media platform she has and how authentic her stories were. And I love the late Nelson Mandela because I grew up in a military dictatorship for the first 9 years of life, and I observed how he helped liberate South Africa from apartheid, and that's something I wanted to do. So the media capital of the world, New York City, moved there. And so that was the first step I did, change the environment. And then the next thing that I needed to do was to be brave enough to be myself. So I've taken this initiative to be willing to step out in the world as I am, but I needed to truly understand who I am, what my awareness of it is, what my strengths and weaknesses were. And too many people I found define their identity by their achievements and not by the amount of lives they touch. So they go through life, living life like this. And the problem with living life like this is that you never get sustainable happiness. In fact, it causes you to place too much of a premium on other people's opinions and not enough on your potential to do good.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, thank you. And so when I had done the self-work, I basically asked a bunch of people, colleagues, former colleagues, family, friends, what it is that they thought I did. How would you describe me? And they all came up with some variation of connector and teacher. And so that was all I had to go off of. I was like, okay, connector and teacher. I guess I have to figure out what it is I can connect with and teach. And it was like connecting people across cultures and teaching people how to communicate across those backgrounds. And so the next thing I needed to do is to set a goal, and not just any type of goal too, like a really big goal, big enough to scare me to the point that I needed to grow up into that person to achieve that. And that's when I identified who the next set of global leaders were. And I said, okay, how many people are under 30 in the world? And there's research out there that shows that there are 3 billion people under 30. So I was like, I'm going to be someone that connects with these 3 billion people, and I'll show them how they can be global leaders. I've lived in the military dictatorship. I've always been the minority everywhere I've been. And I've one of the compliments I always get is that I'm able to exist in all these environments. So I want to show people that in order to be a global leader in the globalized period we're living in, digitalized period, we need to know how to communicate across cultures. And no one knows how to do that today. So change your environment, make sure you do a deep self-work, and then set a goal big enough to scare you. And then once I set that goal, I needed to learn how to tell my story. And this is what we're doing here. For me, it was never easy. I never thought my story was special. I know it's crazy to some people to hear that. I just thought I moved around a lot, didn't quite fit in. No one who wants to hear that. But I had to have confidence in the fact that my story is my own and it's unique, and then someone who's going to resonate with it. So I just changed the focus of all my blog posts to talk about everything that I learned from the multiple locations that I had. And then I launched a podcast, which is what ultimately catapulted my career, in which I would bring people from different parts of the world to talk about how they embraced their identity and how they were making differences in the communities and how they were using that to be business men and women, how they were using that to educate other people. And to my surprise, that took off. And the lesson that I learned there was everybody wants to know that they matter, that they're being seen. And and the world just sort of shows people a limited version of what success is like, a limited version of what culture is like. And so, it was that, that led me down the path of writing blogs that were personal and then launching a podcast that sort of tackled culture and business in a unique way.
That's an amazing journey. And I want to break that down just a little bit more, because what you described in experience is probably something that many people can identify, being at that place of what are my real talents and how do I present that to the world? Because there's no real job description for what you described. One of the things that we talk about a lot in our family is the concept of awareness and self-awareness and consciousness and all the, and it's again, what job is that, right? Brendan Burchard and Gary Vaynerchuk, they are talking a lot these days about self-awareness and as being, the number one skill. And what you described, and in particular, you're tracking back to when you were 10 years old and you had sort of whatever precipitating event that sparked that sense of awareness in you and that then carried with you throughout. It's such a young age to be tapping into that. It's pretty amazing. So
thank you.
How you still had all this stuff in the way, you still had, basically I don't have a job now and I have this visa issue and I have bills to pay, I have to live someplace, so it's you really took a gigantic leap of faith. So what did you do next? You left your job and you kind of figured out what your talents were, and it was bringing cultures together, bringing people together, communicating. So where did you go? How did that unfold?
Great question. And so, where I come from, Nigeria, education is placed on a premium. You're supposed to be an engineer, doctor, or lawyer. And so when I moved to New York City and I was telling my parents that, I was like, hey, I'm leaving a job that's guaranteeing me a visa to go to a new city. The compromise that I knew in my head, I already worked this out because I was like, I'm going to go there to get my MBA. So to them, MBA, oh, wow, my son is advancing. He's going. Okay, he's going to the next level. That makes sense to them. And so I got throughout my New York, I applied to schools in New York, and I got into one. And then I would go to the classes at night and I'll make New York City my campus. And I knew that just being people would be good for me. And then, having the MBA would at least calm my parents down for 2 more years. And so I did that. And then in the process of figuring it out, because I already knew that I was going to graduate, but I wasn't going to go to Deloitte or Accenture or be an investment banker. I knew that I wasn't going to do any of that. I kept trying to figure out what I wanted to do. So the podcast was the first idea for me. When I launched the podcast, I saw that with my consistency, I was able to build a community. They weren't paying me for anything,
right,
but I needed to learn how to leverage that into something else. So it came in the form of one of my listeners. She had heard my podcast. She said, "Thank you. I didn't know that I was a third culture kid." A third culture kid is anyone that spends the formative periods of their lives outside their parents' culture. So diplomatic kids, missionary kids, and people that travel a lot. But thank you for exposing me to a part of myself that I'd always wondered about. Have you thought about speaking to fellow other, diplomatic kids or people like that? And she planted a seed in my head. I was like, oh, I never thought of myself as a speaker, really. But she was like, yeah, no, you should really do it. In fact, there's something at the World Bank. I think you should come speak for it. I was wondering if I could submit your name. And I was like, yeah. And she's like, it doesn't really pay anything. I was like, just World Bank. Yes. And then, and so I figured out a way there. And then so I was like, okay, even though I don't know what my career is going to be, and I know that podcast is connecting or something, and this listener introduced me to the idea of speaking, the connecting thread is still telling my story. I can leverage that into more organizations. So I did well at the World Bank. People liked it. People started referring me. I started to say, what if I leverage that to other people and other organizations? Say, I've spoken such and such. I would love to do this at yours, even if it's for free. And then I just wanted to build a portfolio. A lot of artists and entrepreneurs, I always tell them, just build a portfolio that when it comes time for you to really pitch yourself to several big organizations or charge, you have the testimonials to back you up, you have the visuals to validate it, and then you really build confidence as you're doing all that. And so I would do that through my schooling. I would go to school at night and people would be asking me where I am during the day. It would be random events or random conferences. And then I started to do that, but I wasn't making any money. In fact, I was flat broke throughout the whole process of me being in New York City before I finally hit it off. I've been fired twice. I've been fired twice. I've owed the IRS money and I owed my school $20,000. And I figured out a way to pay off all those. But the important thing that I was doing was I was like, I feel happy regardless of all these initial obstacles. And so as I continued to be a better speaker and the podcast continued to grow, I started to make a few lists. Entrepreneur ranked as #2 business podcast 2014. Other publications started to pick it up. People started pitching me to be on my show. And then people started saying, I heard about you on the World Bank, and people were like, okay, let's get more of this Tayo guy. And then the Trayvon Martin thing happened. Eric Garner, Trump, Brexit, and all that just kept happening. And people I observed that people were now at a point where they were walking in eggshells. They didn't know how to communicate. They didn't trust their neighbors. They didn't trust their families. And I saw it as an opportunity to say, what if I went into companies to tell them that, hey, it's okay, you have all these differences, but here's how you can talk about these differences without alienating people. And I shared my story. It's like, this is what that's essentially what I've done all my life. And it became such a big thing where I was like, I leveraged myself for years to build my portfolio. And then I connected all my expertise to a bigger problem in the world, which is people not knowing how to communicate. And once I started to get a few companies in my portfolio, it became really became more of a systemized thing where I was a speaker / consultant / media personality that people sought out for their opinions. But,
wow.
Yeah.
That's interesting. That reminds me, I was listening last week to something Gary Vaynerchuk was saying, and he was talking about how sort of entrepreneurship kind of happened at the right time for him to also become this bigger speaker and thought leader that he is right now. He was, he says it a lot. He was doing it before it was cool. And then suddenly it's the thing to do. And for you, it was sort of you were broke for a lot of time when you were doing this. You had debts to pay off. And that's a place that a lot of artists can relate to in terms of especially artists who stop their job to then pursue something else. And they're like, okay, I don't have an income. I don't know, where the next dime is coming from. And that's a very scary place. But at the same time, you built your portfolio, you were creating something every day, you were doing the podcast, you were connecting with people, and the world kind of aligned in a way that, well, now your career is launched because all the right things fell into place, and you were developing at the same pace. You were developing who you needed to be to then step into this role that now suddenly needs to be filled. But
yeah. And you know what's funny? You both of you are such great interviewers. I'm glad that everybody subscribe and leave a review. It helps the ratings. So what is so interesting about what you said is that a lot of people get to that point where, yes, they know that they're good at something, but they're not getting compensated for it. And they get discouraged because of that lack of compensation, and then they give that up. And then that's how you have all those scenarios where you're watching Shark Tank, you're like, I had that idea, right? Or like that. And so I don't want to paint this picture where, because it was definitely tough. And I was taking other jobs. I was doing 2-9 out. I would come back. I was going to school, for goodness sake. And then when I graduated from school, I was taking consulting jobs that I felt like I could do odd things. I would help someone with their social media. I'll help someone build their whatever. But I was still focusing on that. And so I always encourage people to stay consistent with that and learn how to recognize opportunity. That's why the self-awareness then is the first thing you need to work on. Is if you truly know your strengths and weaknesses, you continue to build your portfolio to make sure you accentuate those strengths, and then make sure you're putting yourself in the environments where those strengths can be seen. And then what happens is that someone's going to say, I heard you did that. Can you come do that? And someone's like, okay, I'm going to refer you to that. And it's really all this process. The more you continue to do that, the more you put yourself in a position where you end up being where you want to be. But you can't let any discouragement bring you down and use that as the world is not ready for me, because that's not the case.
Yeah, absolutely. An excellent point. So your podcast name, As Told by Nomads, right?
Right.
Okay. So how did you come up with that name, and when did you start? And then we want to know what else you're doing as well.
Oh man, there's so many. Okay, so I had there was this Arianna Huffington event. Arianna Huffington is one of my favorite people. I study a lot of media people, and I was like, I wonder how Arianna did this, because she speaks with a very Greek accent, and she's like someone that's here. And I was in school one day. Someone said, I have free tickets to Arianna's Thrive. This was the beginning of anything she did with Thrive. She was still at Huffington Post at the time. And so it's like, she's doing like this 2-day event in New York City, and I have free tickets. And it was on the table. I was like, sure, I'm coming. Then I didn't know I was going to, and that was free. It was like $2,000 worth. I was like, I'm going. Wow. So I went there, and it was a magical event. I mean, I'm talking about thought leaders from all parts of the world for 2 days straight. And I was just sitting there taking notes, and hearing about things from why you shouldn't eat too much sugar, which I'm still working on, and to why media is great and how you should focus on leadership. And then there was something she talked about. She said, at some point I was always worried about my accent, and people always tell me I have to change it. And I was like, I ended up embracing myself, and it just sparked the idea in my head. I was like, I'm a third culture kid. I'm a TCK. I listen to a lot of podcasts. What if I talked about people that don't look like they're supposed to do and talk like they're not supposed to talk like, and just bring all these people together? And I was like, you know what? I'm going to do a podcast. I was sitting there writing all these notes. I was like, I'm going to do a podcast. And I was like, yeah, that is my thing. That's the only thing I have 20 years of experience in. And no one else can tell me that you don't have marketing experience. I'm going to do a podcast being me by bringing more people like me. And then I just had the idea, and I just started to write down the first episodes. And I was thinking, what would I call these people? I was like, I don't know, maybe people that travel a lot, nomads. It was just very simple like that. And then I think I first thought third culture kid lifestyle. I was like, no, that's too limited. What if it goes bigger? And then I was like, As Told by Nomads. It's people from all over the world telling their stories. And so I put that there. And since then, nomads has become more symbolic in the sense that I'm more talking about the nomadic mindset, where everybody, you can still be in your state, country, wherever, but you're exposing yourself, because I firmly believe that the two reasons people don't feel like they can change the world is because of a fixed mindset and a limited worldview. And so a nomadic mindset is embracing a growth mindset as well as a expanded worldview. And so that's the story with that. Arianna was the spark. I emailed her after that, by the way. And she thanked me and made me a contributor to Huffington Post.
Wow, wonderful.
Amazing.
Yeah, and that was back in the day. But I was like, you sparked my idea.
Yeah,
That was awesome.
fantastic. Yeah. So, and that was, when did you start that?
That was 2014. The podcast itself came out in August 14, and I had the idea early in 2014, and I was recording all through summer, I think. Yeah.
And so, you're releasing what every few days? It looks like you're releasing a new episode.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I just put out 313 before we hit record. I started with once a week, got to twice a week. Now I'm working towards 3 times a week.
Fantastic. That's fantastic. Yeah. That's a lot of work. I mean, people don't realize that's a lot of work scheduling, and if you're doing transcripts and getting them published and all that. So that's fantastic. Yeah. And so I was looking for on your site, you said something on your site, I'm not finding the exact wording, but something along the lines of breaking the barriers of echoes.
Echo chambers. Yeah.
Echo chambers.
Yeah. A lot of people like to stay in environments that perpetuate their own thoughts. Like you saw it through this election, right? Even, Facebook and social media sort of created that digital echo chamber where you only got news that validated your opinions. Mm-hmm. And my life work, my legacy, whatever I want to do is to ensure that leaders understand how to be inclusive, right? How to empower the people that they've been charged with the responsibility of inspiring. And so when I said the 2 problems of the world is fixed mindsets and limited worldviews, it's that, a lot of people are only hearing what they want to hear, whether it's on purpose because it's comfortable for them. And I want to sort of encourage people to be comfortable being uncomfortable. I want people to be curious about what they don't know. And I want people to be the minority in an environment at least every week, once every week. Whether if you're straight, go into somewhere that, in a gay LGBTQ environment, find out something. If you're black, white, black, Hispanic, Native American, all that. I want people to start doing that, because if we don't start that at an early age, we have a problem where all the people grow up with these unconscious biases, and they make decisions on these unconscious biases, and then they hire fire based on these unconscious biases, and they produce media based on these biases. And you have, we've seen it, all this Harvey Weinstein, all these Trump calling someone Pocahontas the other day. I mean, these are all these things where you have no awareness, and it's something that I'm trying to promote. So that's what I meant by that.
Yeah, that's really important, because you talk a lot about mindset, and one of our favorite books is Mindset by Carol Dweck, mm-hmm. where the fixed mind versus the learner's mind. So I'm sure you're familiar with that, and that's so critical. Upon first reading and listening to the audiobook version, where it talks about how first of all, we understand conditioning, that what we don't understand is the extent to which we're conditioned by our programming. We just have no idea the layers of that until we start to kind of rise above it a little bit through things like what you described. But what was pivotal for me in that was the concept of embracing failure, because that's the next step toward improving on something and eventually winning on something, rather than giving up because, hey, I didn't do that so well, or that didn't work and therefore I'm out. It's like, that's just, like being eager, just like you were. So when you were in New York, in between when you left your first job and you didn't spend time inside or surfing the internet so much, you were out meeting people in the world. So again, your legacy of connecting and connecting with people continued. So you do your podcast, and you are a public speaker as well. And what else? Like, you work for corporations, like major corporations that hire you to work on their diversity program?
Great point on the failure part. So I always say everything's right for my podcast. So my podcast was able to allow me to become a speaker. I'm a signed speaker. I get invited. I had a goal to speak 12 times this year, and by the grace of God, I'm going to be able to speak at 50 times this year.
Woo, wow.
What I'm doing right now is heading to my 51st after this conversation. But I didn't do that, right? I thought I was going to speak 12. So I do that. And then I have, I consult with companies and individuals on how to communicate. So with companies, it's helping them with communicating across cultures in the form of diversity and inclusion. So they'll bring me on to do the diversity training, or to talk about unconscious bias, to help them work with, in groups and out groups dynamics. With individuals, I'm pretty excited about this. Another way I feel like you can build leaders is by helping people tell their stories. And so me and one of my friends were launching this thought leader program where we go through, it's a 3-month program where we go through a step-by-step process on how to define your brand, become the domain expert in yours, and how to tell the right stories with the right authenticity. Because part of building global leaders, which is what I want to do, is making sure that people are equipped with the right ways to tell their stories, which is kind of exactly what you're doing with this podcast. And so I'm really committed to doing that on the corporate level and on the individual level, because not everybody's going to work at a corporation. So in the individuals, I want to make sure they're armed with those tools. And so that's what I do. It's a lot of those things. And then occasionally I'll, do like a media spot. I did a show this summer called The African Millennials. And it was a bunch of us millennials talking about Africa and the diaspora. And so, yeah.
Yeah. That's awesome. And so that's a lot. So that's podcasting, it's speaking, it's consulting on the corporate and individual level. So as many of us creatives are familiar with wearing all the hats and doing all the things and feeling overwhelmed, what are your daily habits, rituals, routines? What keeps you going? What keeps you doing all those things? And so I followed Tayo on social media, and he is one of the most enthusiastic human beings alive. I'm convinced. There's very few people who are as energetic as you are all the time. It's not just like once in a while he's super enthusiastic. It's all the time. He is like loving it. So what do you do to keep all that energy?
I've always been a kid that bounces off the walls. No one knew what to do with my energy, but I channeled it into my work. This is what happens when you truly love what you do. So my daily routine is, I try to wake up with some positivity, right? There are a bunch of YouTube channels with they have this compilations of, inspire yourself to do this. If you don't want it bad enough, you're not breathing. All those type of YouTube things. I try to wake up with that just to remind that, but every day I'm committed to practicing gratitude. So every time I wake up, I'm like, what am I going to be grateful for today? When I go to bed, what are the things I'm grateful for? A daily goal of mine is to put a smile on 5 people's faces. And the reason why I say people should do that is because in order for you to put a smile on someone's face, you can either smile and then you get that smile back. You can compliment them. That causes you to notice something about them, or you can ask them a question that's like, wow, you cared, Bob. So it's just informing you, putting you in a mindset where you're actively noticing who's around you. And so, those daily habits, and I work out. So I try to channel that energy. So that's it. It's making sure I read, practice gratitude, stay committed to fitness. But, they say CEOs read about 50 books a day. I'm approaching 40.
A day? What?
Oh, sorry, a year, rather. Sorry, a year.
Oh, geez.
Take his reading course.
No, but that's it. It is. I know. I tell everybody to know their learning style. Back in the day, there wasn't audio, but there weren't a lot of audiobooks or YouTube type of stuff, and so and that didn't account for dyslexia and all those people that prefer not to read. So understanding your learning style has been good for me. I read physical books as well, but I consume information better with audio and video.
Same here.
And so with Audible, what I've done is I just download a bunch of books. And I've trained myself to listen to them at 2 times, 3 times speed.
Yeah.
So I listen to podcasts of that. So now, people always say, how do you read all these books? I'm like, well, I'm reading them or listening to them at a 3 times speed. So I'm able to get through a 4-hour book in like 1.5 hours, so that's what's happening. And New York you're always on the subway. So just maximize those times.
Yeah, that's such a good point. Maximizing those little minutes, because a lot of times too, with entrepreneurs, with creatives, especially those of us just getting started, we haven't established a routine yet. So we're always like, I never have time. I'm doing everything, and I never have time for anything. And that's like the big deal. Yeah. And so it's like finding those moments, like you're in a commute. Like what we do a lot is when we're traveling, we put the podcasts on that we want to listen to. Exactly. When we're cooking, when we're doing things that aren't actively in front of our computer, we're doing the information, listening to the stuff that keeps us going and energized. So
there you go. That's so true. I do it with the gym. I do it with cooking. I do it with laundry. Do it. Yeah. So when people always say, "How do you do so much?" I'm like, you all have the same access. It's not like I'm doing anything different. Right. So.
Yeah. No.
It's like that meme. It's like we all have the same amount of days as Beyonce and same amount of hours in the day as Beyonce. And it's so true. It's like successful people have just figured out the best way to maximize their time to where even their downtime is productive.
Yeah. Well,
Time management.
Yeah, but when you start really delving into the realm of building and growing your mind, your thoughts, living in the world of ideas, associating with others through connections and podcasts, whether it's interviews or listening to podcasts or whatever, the more you do that, the more it inspires that in you.
Mm-hmm.
Back to the people you hang out with kind of thing. It's so important. So for those in our audience, for instance, as well as yours, who don't have a chance to be directly connected with people, that's like the first entry into basically the world at your fingertips, tapping into listening to inspiring people. There's nothing better I have found to get me going, in the morning and get me thinking on the right track is listening to inspiring and motivating podcasts. So we've listened, you mentioned the audiobooks. So what's something you're reading right now, or if you want to toss out some favorite titles or books, whatever.
Okay. So something I'm reading right now is The New Jim Crow. And that's talking about how we went from slavery to Jim Crow laws to mass incarceration, and saying mass incarceration is the new Jim Crow. Mm-hmm. One of my favorite books though, in the last few years, Mastery is amazing. And that talks to your point about finding role models, and I think people should always. It's Robert Greene. He did a good job with that. Yeah. The Alchemist is one of my favorites. And
that would be
and Born a Crime by Trevor Noah. Trevor Noah is one of my favorite. He's also like he's what you call TCK, half white, half black, but he sort of speaks 5 languages. He was always in all these environments, and he was just talking about how he was born a crime in the sense that apartheid was, it was illegal to have black and white people marry, and what he learned through that. And me and Devani have a passion for Harry Potter books. So,
yes, absolutely.
I'm a Ravenclaw, by the way. But anyways, Harry Potter books. But yeah, those are the things I would recommend. But you don't have to read Harry Potter, but I think everybody should.
No, yes, you do.
Well, there you go.
Yes, you do.
And watched each movie 12 times. No, 24 times. No, 36 times.
Memorize it, guys. Memorize the stuff. Well, that's an interesting point, because nonfiction really tells you the true stories, and those are so important and so uplifting, because it gives you the reality, it gives you the ups and downs, it gives you the motivation. But then there's just as much in fiction that you can find that's very character building, especially for young people, like when it can be hard to who do I look up to? My peers aren't doing this stuff. I'm different. I want to do this thing that's not the go to school route or find a job route, which is fine, by the way, what you do. But you can find a lot of characters and heroes in stories that you can connect to at a level of hey, they didn't want to do that. Harry didn't want to go kill a murdering, mad, evil thing. He didn't want to do that, but he did it, and that can be an angle,
Yeah.
So anyway, that's just my rant on why every entrepreneur should read it.
No, it's a good point. But you know, Devani, how obsessed I am with Superman. And in fact, I call myself the African Superman. But for me, the reason I read comics as well, and I watch a lot of superheroes. But if you look at Superman's story, he was an immigrant. It was a foreign alien that came here, didn't quite fit in anywhere. He many times had to suppress a lot of himself, or just so that he could fit in. And I just identify with that at such a young age. And a lot of people think it's just the images. I'm like, for me, it goes a lot deeper than that. It was this was a guy who wants to do good. He stands for justice, truth, and all that. And that's I want to do good in the world. But I was like, how do I do it? Where do I do it? How can I not fit in now? How can I? And so that was the story for me. And I've always grown up with that. And that's kind of how that's to your point. I know it's a fictional story. No, it's not fictional story because he's my cousin. But
but you heard it here first, guys.
Right.
Oh man.
So back to we have a few more minutes, and we would like to learn more about what your goals and plans are for your brand and your vision.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I always say use your difference to make a difference. It's the mission statement of everything I do, right? I firmly believe that each one of us has the ability to make an impact, and each one of us is beautiful as we are. And so I want to be able to get to the point where everyone understands the power of their story, and they can tell that eloquently, and they can understand how they can use that with their sphere of influence. That's embracing inclusion, celebrating diversity. And what I'm really excited about is I'm actually diving into, I touched on it earlier, the course world where we're doing this Thought Leader Academy, where we're bringing people from all over the world, where we're not, opening it to all over the world, and we're encouraging people to enroll if they're interested in learning how to tell their stories, especially for 2018 onwards. And I want people to understand that they can be a thought leader and industry expert and own the domain name. You don't have to have a degree to validate your success. You don't have to have a certain type of look to be beautiful. You don't have to have achieved certain things by this age to do that. I mean, if you look at my life, on one lens, you could say you could easily be read of as a failure if you didn't go to the end, because you had fired twice in a span of 2 years. You quit a job, you had a near-death experience, you were broke multiple times, you owed the IRS money, you didn't know how to pay rent. That's one story. Or you can talk about, figure out how you built an audience in 150 countries. You're speaking on TEDx stages and United Nations Foundation and all that. But those two things are not mutually exclusive. They happen to me simultaneously. I remember going to speak on several stages, feeling almost like an imposter, because I was like, I don't know how to pay this rent for the next month. But they're like, hey, they invited me. And I just kept believing in that. And so I want people to get to that point where they firmly believe in who they are. And I'm always accessible everywhere. I'm Tayo. I think I'm the only one that's Tayo Rockson in the world, but I'm Tayo Rockson everywhere. And I'm always, as Devon can tell you, I'm like energetic all the time. So I'm happy to answer any question.
So for you, motivation is not an issue. And what do you think keeps you going the most? Is that, you already have this natural innate energy, so it's just driven from within?
Well, I mean, there's that, but what keeps me going is the fact that there are always problems in the world. Like the slavery in Libya, right? That's something that's driving me right now. I come from Nigeria. There's still some girls there that haven't been freed, right? From all that. There's always a problem solved. So that's what keeps me going. The fact that we have people that are racist or sexist or misogynist, those things, I don't feel like my work is ever done. That's I guess that answers the question there. So it's the fact that I know there's a lot of stuff to do. I don't rest on my laurels because there's so much.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And that's just that's a really great way to look at the world. Not because you hear a lot just in media and online, like, oh, it's so crushing to hear about this, or oh, it's so crushing to hear about that. And it's true. It's hard to be living in like your bubble of optimism, as some people might call it, where you're always happy and cheerful, and yet there's somebody else over there who's not, and they have this situation that maybe they didn't, they can't control happening to their life. But at the same time, the other side of that is, if I'm good, if I'm optimistic, that means that I can just help somebody else. Because you can't help people from a place of like, oh my God, the world's burning and it's Armageddon and we're all going to die. Well, like it's not going to inspire anybody.
Exactly. And it's the simple things, really. I mean, that's why I wouldn't put in a smile on 5 people's faces. That's something I'm committed to, because I'm like, maybe you had a bad day. I'm just going to remind you, hey, that's a nice dress. It's a nice shirt. Where'd you get that? I love that jersey. I also love LeBron. I saw you wearing that. Just finding those things where someone can smile for like a few seconds.
Making a positive difference in the world. That is Tayo Rockson. Thanks so much for joining us today. You're amazing.
No, the pleasure is mine.
And thank you so much. I'm sure that there are a lot of people going to get a lot of wonderful benefit from your story. And we're looking forward to continuing following you.
And definitely listen to his podcast. It's As Told by Nomads, and his website that will be linked below is tayorockson.com.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much. And you should definitely listen to I Create Daily. I Create Daily podcast. I want you to leave a review, a 5-star rating. All right. Yeah. Make sure you talk it so we get it ranking up high in the charts. But I'm so grateful. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for joining us for the I Create Daily podcast. Please let us know what creatives you would like us to interview and what topics you would be interested in hearing more about.
And if you enjoyed this show, please leave a review on iTunes. We value your feedback. We read all the reviews, and it just helps us get the word out on the I Create Daily podcast. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much.